It's test J, section 2, question 1, and an economist tells us that every business strives to increase its productivity, comma, 4. So I want to go back to what Lonnie was talking about earlier today about trying to understand the stimulus in logical reasoning. I already know that the first thing that they have said here is their conclusion, or it's at least a conclusion. And the reason I know that is that usage of blah, 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 comma, and then the word for. For, since, and because, when used this way after a comma, indicate that the thing I said before was my conclusion, and now I'm going to give you a reason for that conclusion. So how do we know that every business strives to increase its productivity? And they say, well, this increases profits for the owners and the likelihood that the business will survive. So they have concluded that every business does this, and they give you a reason why. The reason, of course, makes a lot of sense. Business owners want profits, business owners want the business to survive. Of course they will try to increase their productivity because it's going to help their profits and help them survive. So there's a little bit of logic going on. Even in that first sentence, there's a conclusion and a premise for that conclusion. Now we have a but. But, it says, not all efforts to increase productivity are beneficial to the business as a whole. Why? Productivity seems useful. You just said that it helps increase profits and the likelihood that the business will survive. But you say some productivity measures aren't beneficial? Okay, I'm listening. Often, it says, attempts to increase productivity decrease the number of employees, which clearly harms the dismissed employees, as well as the sense of security of the retained employees. You might think I'm heartless for the first thing I'm going to say to that, which is, why does the business care about the dismissed employees? I mean, I don't really believe that in real life, but why is the well-being of the dismissed employee of any concern whatsoever to the ongoing business? We have dismissed them, so why do I care? Well, the second part of that, though, is going to kind of explain it to you, right? It hurts the sense of security of the retained employees. Now, I could also say, why do I care about the sense of security of retained employees? But I think we can all fill in the blank there, which is, well, maybe it's not good for the overall health of your business to have every employee constantly looking over their shoulder like, oh no, the boss is here, I'm about to get fired. That probably wouldn't be great for the business overall. Notice, though, that we're filling in that blank. It didn't actually say that, right? It just said, oh, it's going to hurt the sense of security of retained employees. So there is a missing piece in this argument. The objection that you could make here would be, well, wait a second, what if lower sense of security of the retained employees is actually good for my business? What if that's the exact point? What if I want them running scared? Running scared is one sure way to get them to run. If I want my employees to hustle, maybe I make them afraid that they're going to get fired all the time. So you can see how that could be a good thing or a bad thing, right, for the business. They left that out of their argument, which means that's where the lawyers are going to get involved and start fighting about things. Which one of the following most accurately expresses the main conclusion of the economist's argument? Okay, so all of this analysis, by the way, takes me a lot longer to talk about it than it does to actually do all that. I naturally would have been flashing through those ideas as I was reading the argument. Turns out all they want to know is the main conclusion of the argument. Even though I spotted the very first line as a conclusion of the argument, it is not the main conclusion of the argument. If you wrapped all this up, why did they come here to talk to you today? What are they really trying to convince you of? The thing they really wanted to convince you of is that not all efforts to increase productivity are beneficial to the business as a whole. As it turns out, the first sentence is kind of background. Every business does this because it's good for good for profits, and it's good for the likelihood that the business will survive. But, right, it's the not so fast is the thing that they really wanted to convince you of. And they said, not all of these efforts are beneficial because we have to decrease the number of employees sometimes, And when that happens, it harms the dismissed employee and, importantly, the sense of security of the retained employees, which they assume is bad for the business as a whole. So the conclusion of the argument, again, is not all efforts to increase productivity are beneficial to the business as a whole. That's why they're wasting your time with this argument. That's what they wanted to convince you of. Heading into the answer choices, I have a very clear prediction. I always have a very clear prediction on main conclusion questions. If you can't predict the answer on a main conclusion question, you're in trouble, because the answer choices are just going to rehash all the bits and pieces of the argument. If you can't tell me what the conclusion is without looking at the answer choices, I think you're at like a 50-50 at best to get the question correct. So again, I'm looking for not all efforts to increase productivity are beneficial to the business as a whole. A says, if an action taken to secure the survival of a business fails to enhance, and there's no way in hell I would read any more of that answer choice. Okay, I expect answer choices to be wrong. Every answer choice has an 80% chance of being wrong. A was not what I was looking for. It was too broad. It was about every action taken to secure the survival of a business. That's not what they were talking about. They were only talking about productivity measures, not every single action taken to secure a business. I hated the first half of A, which means I don't have to read the second half of A. B, some measures taken by a business to increase productivity fail to be beneficial to the business as a whole. I was looking for not all efforts to increase productivity are beneficial to the business as a whole. B has an identical meaning to exactly what I was predicting, and the answer here is going to be B. Now I'll just skim through C, D, and E and find reasons to get rid of them. C, only if the employees of a business are also its owners. Oh my God, is that not at all what they were talking about? I do not need to read anything about owner employees. That's not what the facts were about, y'all. And so that's another one that's just real easy to dismiss. See what I'm doing? I'm taking more time with the argument so that I can take less time with the wrong answer choices. D, there is no business that does not make efforts to increase its productivity. That was a premise of the argument. That was the first thing they said. Well, actually, that was a conclusion of the argument because of the way they used the word for, but that's not their main conclusion. They weren't here just trying to prove to you that every business takes productivity measures. That was not their point. They said every business takes productivity measures, but some of them fail because, and then they gave you reasons, and it was the part about productivity measures failing that they really wanted to convince you of. D was certainly part of the argument, but it was not the main conclusion. E, decreasing the number of employees in a business undermines the sense of security of retained employees. That was a premise in support of the conclusion that not all efforts to increase productivity are beneficial to the business as a whole. My answer here is B, because it's the one that matches my prediction, and that's how you do a main conclusion question.